Well, Health Minister Zweli Mkhize says the high number of infections in the Western Cape can't be attributed to the testing rate in the province. According to the latest figures, the Western Cape has recorded nearly 16,000 of the country's overall picture, and that is to 24,000 cases countrywide. It also has the highest number of COVID-19 related deaths. To discuss this, we are joined by the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Winde. Premier, good morning to you. Let's first begin with the Minister's dismissal of your assertion as a province that the reason we are seeing a spike in numbers is as a result of smart testing and the screening that you've been doing in the province.
Well, we still definitely test more than any other province. Per 100,000, we still, by far the top tester in South Africa. So definitely it must be. And of course, we do the two different testings. We do the screening and testing, but the focus testing into where we find a positive, we go and trace, around them. That's what we've been doing for quite a long time now. And so definitely, if you don't test, you're not going to find out.
The Minister appears to say that essential services workers are the ones that have been the carriers of this virus, and particularly into the densely populated areas. Do you agree with him, and what has been the strategy to try and contain the spread, therefore?
So obviously you could say that because during lockdown level 5, the cases that we were picking up were obviously frontline. So it was the frontline was either health workers, police or law enforcement workers, and of course in your food processing factories, medical factories, that was a front line, and then of course in our retail. So the same applies for any of those sectors, and that's obviously also where we were going in and hunting the cases. So it's not necessarily only medical frontline, but of course, I suppose the most at risk are our medical frontline, and that's why it's so very important that we support the medical frontline of this epidemic, from not only, as we've seen around the world, the stockholding of PPE, that you've got sufficient PPE for them, but it's also about emotional support. It's about meeting with their unions. It's about being there for that front line. People get scared, and so you've got to make sure that the system that supports them is in place, and that's some of the difficult stuff that we've got to do.
Well, Premier, the situation is about to get worse. You add to that front line the teachers that are now coming on board. Already a number of them have been infected, at least in 4 different schools. You also have another element, the sale of alcohol that's coming, and the limited numbers that it is going to be allowed to be sold for, which is likely to cause problems, as one of the associations has said. How confident are you that your province is going to be able to handle this?
Yeah, I mean, the last one for me is the difficult one, because again, you've got demand and you've also got a bottleneck. So as soon as you restrict the hours of trade, etc., I'm sure that's going to put some pressure on it. We haven't actually come up with what our plan is going to be. They're busy looking at that at the moment.
Do you support the ban on the lifting of the ban on alcohol, by the way, Premier?
Yeah, so we've got these different levels of economic activity, and it's about getting the balance. You've got your health response in place, and we've got to move to a new normal. It would be all very well to say, let's just stay in lockdown level 5 for the rest of the year. We'd definitely beat the virus, but we'd kill everything else. And I mean, you can't do that. You've got to make sure that you actually move back to, and I mean, I support the levels of normality, but normality is never, ever going to be the new normal for at least the next year, or let's say at least until the end of the year. So the new normal is whatever that is that you're going to be doing, whether it's going back to school or reopening your business, you've got to be doing those within the new normal, which is about making sure that we create the best protection we can, the best slowing of the virus that we can, while making sure that we've got sufficient health response in place. And it's about that balance. Every single day it's about that balance, and it's about managing, testing, and that's, I think, whether we're opening up or not, our biggest Achilles heel now is our mechanism to test fast enough. And that really is, for me, so when you are opening up, if you're testing and you're actually getting quick results, you can make decisions on saying, well, hang on a second, this sector, for example, the retail sector, which was the front line of many of the positive cases. And so you start to develop new practices. You start to develop ways in which you deal with this. And so now you see different social distancing inside retail. You see different sanitizing protocols, etc. And you're seeing less infections now in retail that you were seeing in the beginning.
Yeah.
And every sector is going to have to be doing this.
Premier, we have painted this potential powder keg that your province faces. The president has made it clear that any part of the country that threatens to not be able to contain the spread of this virus, it either will remain on level 4 or even be returned to level 5. The question I have for you is that, seeing things the way that we've described them in the last few minutes, are you not at risk of remaining at level 4 or, better yet, actually being returned to level 5?
So we've got 7 million people in our province. We've got 16,000 cases in total. We've actually got 8,000. Half of them have recovered already. It is about creating that balance and understanding. I mean, you spoke about schools in 4 schools. 1,500 schools. I'm not saying that, that this thing is not going to get worse. I'm telling you right now, it is going to get much worse. We're at the start of the curve, but we are putting everything we can day and night to make sure that we're ready for that side of the equation. And then the other side of the equation is the humanitarian disaster, the number of people who are going to die from cancer because they're not able to get their tests done or get it early enough. There's so many negatives on the other side, and everything we're doing is about creating the balance, the best balance that we can find. Now, I said right in the beginning, the blunt instrument of the lockdown, absolutely, you could slow this thing right down, but you cannot stop it. So someday you're going to have to open it up, and you're going to have to go up through your curve so you can go down the other side.
Premier,
so we've got it under control.
Let me interrupt you, Premier.
Sure.
I want you to be direct with me. Is it level 4 that you're anticipating staying in, or what happens when the government says go back to level 5?
We'll have to deal with that when we get to it, but we are going, according to the president's announcement, we are going to level 3 in our province. In actual fact, there are parts of our province that should actually be at level 1 already, because they've got 0 cases or 1 or 2, and that balance is killing the rest of society. In the hotspot areas, which is the focus, we zoom into those hotspots. We work on how we slow it down in those hotspots. The numbers in the numbers in Witzenberg in series are showing us that we've slowed it down. Well, I'm saying that also reservedly, because my problem is I've got probably 20,000 tests outstanding. I think there are probably 100,000 tests outstanding in South Africa today, right now. Yeah. And that's another problem. We make all these statements, but we need to be able to measure. But so far, our hotspot strategy looks like it's slowed it down, and that's what we're now doing in those hotspots in the city. So, I think we've got a plan, and the plan seems to be working.
Premier, final question to you. Your health system, is it coping right now, and is it likely to cope when you get that 20,000 outstanding?
The 20,000 outstanding is not going to make a difference to the health system. The health system is, as we project to our peak, which is at the end of June, where we are going to, in that week, the scenario says 80,000 symptomatic cases in 1 week. And so we're working back on those models to say this is how many beds we need. We have said from day one, the epidemiologists and the specialists have showed us the number of ICU beds, and we've said we are ICU beds too short or too few. We don't have sufficient. But the high care and the other beds, we had the opportunity at 1,000. We're putting in 1,400. We're getting updates on our models now. If we need to put some extra beds in place, we will go even further to put more beds in place. But we're putting our health response in place to deal with the scenarios that have been sketched for us. That's the best that we can do, and we double check them all the time with the national department, with the people modeling the national numbers, of course with our own people modeling our numbers. And that's the best that we can do, review those and make sure that we're on track to what our scenario is showing us. And so far we are on track. Every time we look at the numbers, they're the same numbers that, or very similar to the numbers that we said we would be at 2 weeks ago.
Premier, thank you very much for your time. Alan Winde, the Premier of the Western Cape.